Right to a story we brought you yesterday about vaccination rates at public schools in our city. A CBC Toronto analysis found that 10% or more of students at a dozen schools are unvaccinated because of non-medical exemption their parents asked for. The school with the highest rate of exemption, Toronto's Da Vinci School. Farah Morelli joins us live from there now. Farah, you've been speaking to parents. What are they saying?
Well, Dwight, the news caught a lot of parents that I spoke to pretty off guard. Most of them thought that vaccines were mandatory no matter what. Some of them were even surprised to hear you could apply for exemptions at all. Now, we know, of course, that the number of parents applying for exemptions across the city is increasing. That's according to Toronto Public Health, which they say is a big concern. And the big question tonight remains, why are so many parents still choosing not to vaccinate their kids? It's the public school that has the highest rate of vaccine exemption in the entire city. More than a third of students at Da Vinci Alternative, age 7 or older, are not vaccinated because of their parents' wishes. Is that something that concerns you as a parent? It's news that came as a surprise to most parents we spoke to today, picking up their kids.
So more than 36% of students age 7 here have been exempt from vaccines.
Oh, no. I make sure all my kids have the vaccination, yeah.
Are you concerned as a parent when you hear that?
Yeah, of course, yes.
I was curious to know what your reaction was.
My husband called me when he heard the news, and so, he said, what do you think of that? And I said, well, we don't have to worry because our kids were vaccinated.
And for some, the news came as an especially unwelcome surprise.
What do you make of that?
I think it's, honestly, my kids are vaccinated. I know how people are doing the research and how they're going about making these decisions. I think they're not really fully informed. It's putting other people at risk. It's unfortunate, and I don't know what it's going to take for people to realize these things are put in place to keep everyone safe.
Toronto Public Health says schools with more than 5% of children who are unvaccinated are at risk for an outbreak of contagious diseases like measles. That's why it's been working to spread the message about the health risks associated with not getting vaccinated with ads like these.
I got one when I was a baby, and it's like a shield, and then the shield protects you from other people, like that has like viruses or disease.
Under provincial rules, certain vaccines are mandatory for school-age children, but parents can apply for a non-medical exemption based on their own beliefs. Despite its campaigns and medical evidence, Toronto Public Health says the number of parents seeking those exemptions has been increasing over the past 10 to 12 years.
If you've got 1 or 2 kids like that in schools scattered across the whole of Toronto or the whole province, it's everyone else can do their bit and make sure that we keep diseases like measles under control. But if they're all in one school, then you've got a big issue. It's like a tinderbox, just waiting for the spark to just set off an explosion.
Now, one of the things that Dr. Crowcroft mentioned was that we're talking about these high rates of exemptions at different schools, but when you look at the rate across the city, it's still relatively low at 1.7%. So it's not a cause for widespread concern, but her point is that we're heading in a not very great direction. One of the things she talked about that she'd like to see is issues like immunization actually brought in as part of the school curriculum. Now, we did, once again, Dwight, try and reach out to the Toronto District School Board to speak to somebody from Da Vinci School. We were told that they wouldn't be commenting, and once again, we're directing questions back to Toronto Public Health.
For that, Farah. Toronto police identifying the city's latest homicide victim, a 21-year-old man who was shot and killed in an East York apartment building overnight. Shannon Martin joins us live from near Dawes Road and the Danforth. What have you learned, Shannon?
Well, we know his name was Warren Pearson. He was just 21 years old. Residents tell us they heard 3 gunshots here at 1 a.m., but police were not called to the building until just before 5 a.m. That's when officers found his body in the stairwell, and that's where they believe he was shot. A gruesome sight outside this East End apartment complex as police removed the body of the city's latest homicide victim, 21-year-old Warren Pearson.
I never heard gunshots before in my life.
It was just after 1 a.m., she says, when she and her sister heard 3 shots.
We both were looking outside. We turned all the lights off and locked our bedroom doors. We were scared.
Homicide detectives spent all day in and out of the 15-story building. Several shell casings were found, but no gun.
We know from just a brief review of the closed-circuit TV here that there were individuals in the lobby milling about.
That footage, not yet released by police, was recorded around 12:45. Pearson met someone in the building. His body would be found by a resident hours later in this stairwell.
It could have been a drug deal gone bad, or it could have been, who knows, it could have been just an innocent person.
You see people that are on drugs hanging around, but that's about it. They don't bother you. You go on, you do your own thing. But to hear this is scary. You didn't think it was going to happen so close to home.
So you've lived here 2 years? This father of 4 says there's often trouble and he's had enough. How does that make you feel? You're a dad.
You know, it's not safe. This place is not safe anymore. And it's not the first time that incident happened. There's so many issues going on. So the only option I have, just move this somewhere else.
Police went door to door hoping to find more witnesses and around the neighborhood today, also looking for more security video. And there's that CCTV footage that we talked about in the story. We asked police today, could that be released? But so far it hasn't. Dwight will bring that to our viewers, though, as soon as it is.
Thank you for that, Shannon. Devontae Miller walks into Durham court today expecting to testify against a Toronto police officer and his brother accused of viciously beating him. Now, Miller didn't get to testify, but what was heard in court came as a shock today to defense lawyers. Durham Police Constable Barbara Zabdir says she heard Devontae Miller screaming that he was being beaten by Toronto police officer Michael Theriault and his brother. Lorenda Redekop now with a day of dramatic testimony.
Devontae Miller arrived in court today expecting to testify. So far, we've only heard from him in his 911 call.
Hello?
Hello, 911?
Hi, where do you need the police?
Hello?
At that point, Michael Theriault, the off-duty Toronto police officer charged, takes the phone. His brother, co-accused Christian Theriault, was already on the line with 911. Saying they'd chased one of 2 people who had broken into their truck, that the person fought with them, and now they had him restrained. Constable Barbara Zabdir was one of the first officers to arrive on scene that night. She says when she got there, she already knew about the allegation of people breaking into cars. She says on the driveway, she saw a black man, face down, blood coming from his eye. She says she knew the white man holding him down was an off-duty police officer and told the court, I gave my handcuffs to him because space was very limited. That would mean Michael Theriault is the one who handcuffed Devontae Miller. She remembers walking Miller under arrest to the ambulance. He told me that we got the wrong guy. I told him we always do. Constable Zabdir says she meant that suspects say that all the time. She later testified that when she arrived, Miller was screaming that he was beat up by the Theriaults and that they hit him with something. Both defense lawyers were shocked by this revelation, as it never came up at the preliminary inquiry. Alan Gold told her, "You tell His Honor why you did not mention this new memory in your previous conversations," then said, "Because you never had this memory." Zabdir also acknowledged she's paid attention to the news about this case, something witnesses are told not to do. Another Durham police officer also testified. Constable Sean McQuoid said he took an official statement from Michael Theriault asking, "Did you identify yourself as a police officer?" The answer, "No, I did not have a chance to. Me and my brother were fighting for our lives. When I did advise him he was under arrest, he did not know I was a police officer." The officer says he asked that question because he thought the answer would determine whether Ontario's police watchdog, the Special Investigations Unit, would be called. In the end, it wasn't called until months later, and it was Miller's lawyer who made that call. Miller is expected to testify here tomorrow.
It was 7 years ago that Radiohead's drum technician died in a stage collapse at Downsview Park. Since then, there have been police investigations, 2 court cases, and 2 inquests. When the results of the Toronto inquest were released, the band called them frustratingly insufficient. Now, the band is speaking out again after an inquest into the collapse in England. Katie Nicholson has been following this case for us. She joins us now. So, Katie, first tell us about this inquest in England.
Okay, so this just concluded about 2 weeks ago, and it comes after the the inquest that we had here in Toronto over March and April, where we heard from more than 24 witnesses, and there were 28 recommendations made. So what happened was the Doncaster coroner, where Scott Johnson's family live, had been waiting for all of the quasi-judicial sort of procedures to end on this side of the Atlantic before being able to declare him dead officially in one of their courts. And she considered a lot of evidence. She heard from Scott's father as well as from Philip Selway from Radiohead. He was the drummer who was supposed to be sitting in that spot the day that the stage collapsed. And here's what the coroner, Nicola Mundy, concluded. She said, inadequate technical advice on construction and design coupled with wholly inadequate construction techniques led to the collapse of the roof system, which caused Mr. Johnson's death. Now, it was that statement and that conclusion in the Doncaster coroner's office that prompted Radiohead to finally be able to put this statement up. They had worked on it together as a band for about a week and a half before releasing it early this morning. And in it, they're demanding an apology. So they're saying it's time for those others responsible to finally and publicly admit their part in this terrible incident. We invite them to offer their apologies to Scott's family and friends for what they have endured, and to our surviving crew for the physical injuries and the mental trauma they have suffered. Now, I did speak with Philip Selway, and he says, to have the other people involved in this collapse come forward and say that they were sorry and to apologize publicly to the Johnson family would mean a lot, and it would, in many ways, honor Scott's memory.
It doesn't feel like that's too much to ask for this family, but we're still expecting another investigation or inquest into this?
Well, so there is one more procedure, and, all of these things have to play out before Professional Engineers Ontario was able to launch its own investigation. So they have been investigating the engineer who was involved in this stage collapse, and now they are finally ready to go to a disciplinary tribunal. That's going to happen in December, and that will get to the bottom of anything that may have occurred that was untoward in what he did, and anything he might have done that could have contributed to the collapse, and to sort of come up with some guidelines so that this sort of thing doesn't happen again within the profession.
Yeah, which you think is the goal here, to not have a repeat of this tragedy. Thank you for this, Katie.
You're welcome.
That was my life. So now they're taking my life from me, and I cannot kill anything that is alive.
An elderly woman with a love for gardening says her condo board is wrongfully making her give up a hobby that's important to her. I'm Talia Ricci, and coming up, we'll tell you about how this situation has escalated to a legal battle.
We have a gardening story coming up, Colette, but I'm guessing gardening weather is over.
Indoor gardening? Greenhouse, maybe? Yeah, I think it is over with, because look at this word. Yeah, cold air in place on our heels, and this is going to be moving in, and it is going to settle in and make itself at home whether we want to welcome it or not. So some of our current temperatures: 5 degrees Toronto, 4 in Windsor, 8 over towards Montreal, the warmer air sliding further east, and then all these cold readings we're seeing from northern Ontario all the way back through the prairies. That's the air that's moving towards us. So we're going to add something to that, and that's going to be this system here over the Dakotas. That's going to be moving in as we go Wednesday night into Thursday, and it's going to bring in some mixed precipitation, meaning, yeah, a little bit of wet snow in there too. So much that we have to talk about. For the overnight tonight, a few flurries possible down into the GTA. That's about it. Nothing more significant than that. So that takes us towards tomorrow morning, where that cold air moves in. Temperatures are going to fall below freezing, and we'll have a wind chill factor in there as well. And then as we go through the day on Wednesday, by the time we're getting towards that afternoon commute, we'll start to see some rain showers mixing with wet flurries moving into the GTA, and that sticks with us into Thursday morning. Some light accumulations, which coming up, Dwight, I'm going to show you what those look like. -1 tonight, though, feeling like -7 tomorrow morning. That's what you need to prepare for, is that number, and we climb to only 4 degrees tomorrow afternoon, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
It's a garden she's been cultivating for decades, but a Toronto woman says she's being forced to dig it up plant by plant. She claims her condo board says she has to make the changes or face tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Talia Ritchie explains.
Those are the irises, they're beautiful, they're light blue.
For nearly 5 decades, this is the place Mira Ristic has called home. And some of her most cherished memories were watching her children grow alongside her beloved garden.
That was my life.
She says back in the day, residents would just ask permission in person to plant trees and bushes. But within the last couple of years, the condo board started insisting that they remove them, saying some were planted without permission.
Because that's disturbed my next neighbor view and deprive him from sunshine.
She says the demand started once her neighbor joined the board. Another complaint was that the greenery was blocking service boxes, vents, and grates. Mira got Rogers Communications to write a letter confirming that it wasn't. But the notices continued.
So now they're taking my life from me, and I cannot kill anything that is alive.
Last month, the board's lawyer said failure to comply could cost the Ristics upwards of $30,000 in legal fees. The Ristics have now hired a legal expert of their own.
We spoke with a lawyer who decided to represent the Ristics after we interviewed her. She said it would be more reasonable for the building to ask the couple to get rid of their garden if they were moving out, and that the board would be hard-pressed to get a court order.
Typically, what we would do is grandfather the existing infraction and say, going forward, nobody else will be able to have a garden in their common element area. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, I can't imagine a mediator or an arbitrator or a judge saying, you've had this for 20 years and now you have to remove it.
And I lift the soil so that water can get through and the plants can have enough water.
Mira says she's not planting anything new and keeping their space maintained. But the once lush garden just isn't the same.
It's something that is beautiful.
CBC News never received a response from the condo board or property manager after several attempts to reach them. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
We are less than 2 weeks away from the 115th Toronto Santa Claus Parade. I'm Greg Ross. Organizers are putting the finishing touches on the 34 floats that will be showcased in the parade. Coming up, we'll give you a sneak peek.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Barrie police are warning parents to double check their kids' Halloween candy after a sewing needle was found inside a chocolate bar. Investigators say a mother called police after her child bit into this bar. Thankfully, the child was not injured. Police are now urging all parents to take a second look at the Halloween candy that was brought home last week. The holiday season is about to kick off, and with that comes parties, food, and often a lot of drinking. Mothers Against Drunk Driving kicked off their Red Ribbon campaign today to bring awareness to drinking and driving around this time of year.
Everyone wants to have a good time. It is a holiday season, but you have to be responsible. And when we talk about the most avoidable criminal offense in the criminal code, that of impaired operating for motor vehicle, we still have to hit that message out loud and clear as much as we possibly can to reduce the loss of life.
In the past year, Toronto saw around 926 impaired driving charges with 2 deaths and 6 people injured. The OPP say they investigated 36 deaths that were the result of impaired driving. Project Red Ribbon asks drivers to show their commitment to driving sober by tying a red ribbon to their vehicles, keychains, purses, or backpacks. We are now less than 2 weeks away from the annual Santa Claus Parade. This marks the 115th year for the event. And today, Greg Ross visited the busy workshop getting ready for the parade. He brings us this sneak peek.
Ho, Santa! Taking a break from his workshop, Santa Claus himself, along with Mrs. Claus, stopped by parade headquarters in Toronto to see how things are going.
Guess what? This is my 115th parade.
While Santa has been around for them all, this will be the 50th for creative director Alfred Iannarelli. People call you Alf for short.
Yes, Alf, not Elf.
For the past year, he's been overseeing the construction of 34 floats that will be showcased in this year's parade.
There's giant candy canes, there's giant Christmas ornaments, gingerbread people, everything that people think about as Christmas.
There's even a float honoring the Raptors championship.
On the front of this float is going to be a large replica of the Larry O'Brien trophy.
But the most important float will be the one that comes last, and that, of course, is Santa's float. I remember being a kid at the parade, and this is the one you wait for. It's the last float, Santa Claus. You know Santa's coming to town when you see Santa here on this float.
Absolutely, and this is the biggest float in the parade every year.
There'll be plenty of kids taking part in the parade as well and wearing colorful costumes. So what are you supposed to be over here?
Gingerbread man. I'm gonna be a parka kid.
Who's the better elf?
Me. No. Me. No. Me. No. Me. No.
And of course those kids will be doing a lot of this.
I'm gonna wave and smile.
So show us how you're going to wave and smile. Parade goers should be aware of a slight change to the parade route this year. Instead of starting on Bloor Street West, coming across and turning here at Queen's Park, the parade will now start on Bloor Street East at Parliament. The reason for the change is because of construction happening on Bloor Street West. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
The economic success we've achieved so far is absolutely incredible.
Will the government's fall economic update reflect its new, friendlier tone? I'll have that story coming right up.
We are going to get an update on the province's financial situation tomorrow, and the Ford government is signaling that the picture is much brighter than the one they painted when they took office. Lisa Shing explains.
Our province is absolutely booming right now.
Premier Doug Ford sets the stage for a rosier fiscal outlook.
Hundreds of companies now know that Ontario is open for business. And when that happens, Mr. Speaker, guess what? We get more revenues up to the provincial coffers.
That higher than expected revenue is giving the government more leeway to implement fewer cuts this year.
I think it'll be a good news day for the people of Ontario.
Government House Leader Paul Calandra wouldn't give specifics of what's in the fall economic statement, but says it'll likely be a departure from the austerity measures the PCs became known for since they came into power. They warned of a $15 billion deficit. As of September this year, the actual deficit was shown to be half of that.
Because of a strong economy, because of finding efficiencies, and all in the context of an increased spending in healthcare and education.
While spending in those areas has increased, it doesn't match population growth and inflation. The opposition will be watching to see if that changes.
It's an opportunity for them to change direction and actually start funding the programs that Ontarians should be able to rely on.
And while there's an effort to change the tone in the legislature and of the government, the song remains the same.
Last year's economic update included several controversial moves, including scrapping the Environmental Commissioner, the French Language Services Commissioner, and the Child and Youth Advocate. But considering Ford's low polling numbers, expect tomorrow's mini budget to have a new tone, a more friendly tone, one the government hopes will resonate with voters. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto is on track to have all of its homes retrofitted to net zero emissions by 2050. And today, the city launched Better Homes TO as a way to help homeowners meet that target.
The problem has been that people don't really know these programs exist, and as a result, that one encouragement to them that the city will help them with a loan for a portion of the cost of retrofitting, they don't know is available. And I think if they do find out, many more people will take part.
The program offers grants for upgrading and renovating homes, as well as the installation of green roofs, a basement flooding insurance subsidy, and a winterproofing program. The homes and buildings in this city generate more than half our greenhouse gas emissions. Some prominent Torontonians are pushing to give the city more power. The group has come up with a plan to allow Toronto to make decisions without provincial approval, creating some separation from the provincial government. Linda Ward explains.
So right now, if the city of Toronto wanted to so much as put in a traffic light, they'd have to go to the province for approval. But this new charter city, Toronto, would do away with all of that, giving the city the power to deal with its own issues, like things to do with streets, public health, local transit, land use decisions, governance issues, and so on. It would also give the city the power to deal with its own revenue streams, including things like property taxes, income tax, and sales tax. Right now, they say they send most of that money to the province and then have to beg for it back. Well, with this proposal, they would get to hold on to more of that money. A group of former mayors, city councillors, former premiers, city planners, they put together this proposal and they held a news conference at City Hall today.
When Doug Ford often says Toronto Council can't get anything done, he might have a point, but not for the deriding motivation from his perspective. It's because legally we don't have the ability to get things done. Some very basic things that we do have to be put in motions that say, please, province, will you allow us to do that? It's time for Toronto to be the mature 21st century city that we are.
And they admit part of this is reactive. The Doug Ford government and the City of Toronto have not had a smooth relationship to date. Recently, in 2018, the Ford government cut the size of City Council nearly in half in the middle of an election campaign. The province would have to approve a City of Toronto charter. They also say that they would like to have a single province amendment to the Constitution so that the province, if it was approved, couldn't come in and change it at a later date. That would need provincial and federal approval. The province has responded in a statement basically just saying that they plan to continue to work with the City of Toronto, while these politicians are hopeful that this proposal would spark a discussion about the relationship the city has with the province. They admit it could be several years before this becomes a reality. They say that they're going to continue to consult with the public and try and improve on the ideas until the province is ready to approve it. Linda Ward, CBC News, Toronto.
I owe you a yo-yo today. Strawberry jam is sweet.
The more voices we have, the better the technology will get.
Hey Google, turn off the lights.
It's called Project Understood, and its goal is to teach Google how to understand people with Down syndrome. We speak to this Ontario man who's a part of the project. That conversation coming up a little later in the show. People in India's capital may see a slight improvement in the toxic smog that shrouded the city for days.
Certainly when we arrived yesterday, we could taste it and you could see it. But today, though, is so much different.
The air quality remains at hazardous levels, but winds have blown away some of the dust and pollution hanging over Delhi. The city recently declared a public health emergency. Schools were closed yesterday and today, and the odd-even rule is in place for road use. Private vehicles with odd-numbered plates are only allowed on odd-numbered days, even plates on even days. Mexican authorities are investigating a grisly attack near the country's northern border. Gunmen slaughtered 6 children and 3 women traveling in 3 SUVs. The ambush scene stretched for miles and was littered with spent shell casings. Arthi Pole has more.
This is for the record. Nita and 4 of my grandchildren are burnt and shot up.
The video is stunning, taken by a family member of the victims. Relatives call this a massacre. 9 members of a fundamentalist Mormon family killed Monday. Many were born in Mexico and have dual U.S. citizenship. They were traveling in 3 separate vehicles about 160 kilometers south of the Arizona border. The women were driving with their children from Sonora State in Mexico to a Mormon community known as La Mora in a neighboring Mexican state.
Their family come under attack, and there was a number of vehicles, 3 of them in particular, that were shot, and one of them was set fire.
It's not just got caught in gunfire in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is a whole new level of cartel violence.
It's believed the attack may have been a case of mistaken identity by drug cartel gunmen, according to Mexican officials. Mexico's security secretary said gunmen have misidentified large SUVs for the vehicles of rival gangs. The victims are believed to be 3 women and 6 children, including 8-month-old twins.
We just can't believe that this actually happened to our family. It just seems like a bad dream.
Some children survived. One relative says a boy managed to escape and walk more than 20 kilometers looking for help after hiding his injured siblings in bushes so they would be unharmed. As many as 7 children were transported to U.S. hospitals for treatment.
There are a number of American families that live in that area, and that's a great risk to many, many people, and particularly the idea that women and children are going to be brutally murdered. It's really unthinkable.
The FBI has offered to assist Mexican authorities. U.S. President Donald Trump tweeted, "A wonderful family and friends from Utah got caught between 2 vicious drug cartels who were shooting at each other, with the result being many great American people killed, including young children." And Trump also offered to help. For now, Mexico's president says its country will be responsible for dealing with this incident. Meanwhile, the families of the victims are coping with this devastating loss. Arthi Pole, CBC News, Washington.
Some MPs say the volume and intensity of online abuse they face is on the rise, and it isn't just the politicians, it's also their staff. Without specialized training or mandatory safety measures, individual MPs have had to come up with their own ways to make employees feel safe. As Ashley Burke reports, they say it's now an issue for Parliament to tackle.
Part of Gabriel Yu's daily routine is going through his boss's mail. More and more, there's hate mail and hate messages that sound like this.
You want to bring in sick people into the country? Well, it's you who's sick, Quan. You suck.
Kwan is MP Jenny Kwan, a woman, a visible minority, and the NDP's immigration critic. The hate aimed at her and her staff is relentless. Racism, misogyny, and threats. It festers online and can spill into the real world with angry calls and visits to their office.
Some of our staff felt intimidated and worried about our own safety.
That worry forced Kwan to dip into her budget to make staff feel safe.
We have a panic button, for example, in our office. And so if at any point in time where people are feeling threatened or unsafe, you can actually press the panic button and then help would arrive.
We took action on our own.
With Elizabeth May, it escalated to death threats. She hired a private security consultant to assess her office.
People feel, and including staff, can feel under threat when the MP for whom they work is under threat.
It's exhausting, it's heartbreaking.
May's chief of staff says employees don't have the training they need to deal with the onslaught of hate.
It's very difficult for people. It takes a lot of energy in order to be able to handle the assaults and the insults.
It's an issue in the ridings they're trying to solve here. A committee of MPs is looking for answers.
More needs to be done, and that's some of the things we're looking at, both in terms of is there additional security measures that we can take, how do we deal with remote offices where maybe only one person is working in that office.
The first step is a reporting system for harassment on the job that rolled out in the past year. But that only alerts a problem after the fact. It doesn't give MPs what they need to deal with hate when it first walks through their office door. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
After nearly 4 months of suspended trade, China has quietly resumed its imports of Canadian beef and pork. Observers say the move will be a significant relief to Canadian producers who had real fears of losing the vast Chinese market to other export countries.
China has imported everything, as much pork as they could from Brazil and Europe, but they have depleted those sources. Their national reserve of pork has been depleted, and they had no choice but to resume imports from Canada.
China halted shipments of Canadian meat in June over what was ultimately discovered to be counterfeit paperwork. And in the first 10 weeks of that ban, Canada's beef producers alone lost $100 million. Last year, China was Canada's second largest market for pork exports and its fifth largest for beef. The numbers were expected to steadily rise as China lost about half of its own pork production due to African swine fever. The Canadian Meat Council called the resumption of exports great news. China continues to block imports, though, of Canadian canola. You might want your boss to hear this next story. Microsoft conducted an experiment by giving some of its employees a 4-day work week, and the results were surprising. The trial happened at the company's Japan campus. For the month of August, 2,000 employees worked just 4 days and were encouraged to cut down on emailing and meetings, and they found productivity increase almost 40%. The company also saved in other ways, like a reduced electricity bill. Microsoft plans to conduct another experiment in Japan later this year. And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Called the tire shop today, Colette, could not get through. I think everybody's watching your forecast and they think there's some snow or something coming because they're all getting those winter tires put on.
Yeah, Dwight, it's going to be busy at those shops. It's that time of year. You have to find the winter coat, make these appointments, right, for the snow tires, and also find, you know, the brushes and the scrapers, too, and make sure those are in your car and accessible. We have reached, it's a little early, but yeah, we have reached that point. This is what we're looking at overnight tonight. So just in the short term, those temperatures really falling off through the overnight hours. Then we're going to add some active weather into that. So late Wednesday into Thursday, getting into a bit of a light but a wintry mix, so that by Thursday morning we may have some accumulations there of that 1 to 3 centimeters. I'll show you where you might see how much coming up with my snow accumulation map for you in just a moment. But here are our current readings. Nothing too worrisome as we go into the evening hours. 5 degrees at the moment, 7 in St. Catharines. But as we head towards tomorrow morning, those temperatures not only falling off towards freezing, but in fact they will dip for the lows just below. And then as we go into the afternoon hours, we're only going to pick it up to 4s and 5s around the GTA. And then you just notice how the trend kind of continues. Look at these numbers. They're not really going up where we'd like to see them, and certainly nowhere near double digits. Now, through the overnight tonight, you see a little bit of light flurry activity to the west of us, a little bit of sprinkly activity to the south. So yes, you may see some sprinkles around St. Catharines, Niagara Falls continuing, a few flurries making their way in towards Toronto, over towards Oshawa, back even towards Hamilton, but they'll be very light in nature. That's not any kind of accumulation that I'm talking about. Wednesday morning, we start off pretty quietly but cold, so there'll be a wind chill factor. And then as we get into the afternoon, the clouds begin to increase, that system approaches, and as it does, we'll start to see that light wintry mix. So some showers mixing with some wet flurries. The further towards the north and west you go, the more it's going to be some light, wet snowflakes. And that carries on off and on in waves until Thursday morning. So Thursday morning's commute, there's the chance that Wednesday afternoon's commute could be a little bit messy, but more so I'd expect towards Thursday morning before it peels out of here. But not done yet, because we have to keep in mind those winds over the lake. So over Georgian Bay, as we get towards Thursday night, a few of those lake effect squalls, some of those flurries could come back and make their way down to the GTA. Light in nature in terms of most of the snow accumulations we'd be talking about from this, although Mount Forest approaching 10, 5 for Barrie, and 1 to 3 in that range, really, in terms of what we'd be seeing around the GTA. And it shouldn't be really sticking around because it's so light. It's not that the temperatures won't be cold enough, but it's not really going to hold on. Morning wind chills tomorrow. I want you to know about this. -6 to -8, how it will feel tomorrow morning. Tomorrow afternoon, we barely climb. And there you go. I would love to show you some warm temperatures coming in the long range, but Dwight, you can see this cold air is hanging in there for a little while.
It is, but you're still pretty positive there. I don't see any negatives on top anyway. Thanks.
Yeah, wait, I didn't put Monday on.
Bye, Colette.
Bye.
A prominent director is being criticized for saying Marvel movies are more like theme park rides than proper cinema. We'll tell you who and what his explanation is after the break. Stay with us.
don't think Tony would have done what he did if he didn't know that you were going to be here after he was gone.
That's a clip from Marvel's Spider-Man Far From Home. It is a box office hit, but not everyone's a fan. Director Martin Scorsese has publicly critiqued the superhero genre, and now he's clarifying his stance in an opinion piece in the New York Times. Yelena Adzik joins us with more on this. Is he taking what he said back, or is he doubling down on this one?
He is doubling down. You know what? Originally, he just said an off-the-cuff remark about it's not really my cup of tea. And then everybody pounced on him. So he said, well, listen, it's my right to think it's not my cup of tea, and I'm going to tell you why. He's saying that he appreciates the talent and the people behind these kinds of films, but here's what he says is lacking. Take a look at part of his statement. What's not there is revelation, mystery, or genuine emotional danger. Nothing is at risk. The pictures are made to satisfy a specific set of demands. He's talking about marketing. The situation at this moment is brutal and inhospitable to art, and the act of simply writing those words fills me with terrible sadness. So that's Scorsese, and as I give you a bit of a look here at one of the big films, Avengers, that he's talking about, that happens to lump in many of the Marvel characters, whether it's Iron Man.
Oh, too many. I watched this one, too many.
It's a bit dizzying, right?
Yes.
So this is the thing. Like I said, he's not saying that there isn't talent behind it. He's just saying that when he goes to see a film throughout his whole life, he's looked for something that's pushing the boundaries of art. And in many ways, these might be visually arresting, or often they really are quite stunning to look at. But he's saying from a storyline perspective, these things have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. There are many vetters here. And also they have focus groups. They say, I didn't really like that ending, so they could change the ending. So it's not always the way that, people might think in terms of thought-provoking. I'm kind of stating the obvious,
yes.
I think, but a lot of people really take exception to it. And so he just really wanted to point out that's why he's sad. They're not taking risks.
Yeah, it's not for everybody, but there are different kinds of films out there that are taking risks. So
but they're not in theaters.
No,
that's
they're not
his
in
problem.
Okay, well, let's get to the theaters then, because he has a film that was, I think, at the festival. That's a Netflix film that is just in the theater so it can get on the award circuit, no?
So, well, and that's why some people could say, okay, Scorsese, hypocrite much, because it is true that his movie has a very, very short run in theaters, and it's only in 7 or 8 theaters in the U.S. and even fewer in Canada, right? So it's going to Netflix at a very short time after it's been in theater, after it'll be in theaters for a long time. So he did address that. He said in the opinion piece that, listen, I do think it's good that at least it got into theaters. Do I wish it was in more theaters? Yes, I do. But he says he's grateful to Netflix for the fact that they gave him creative license to do what he wanted to do. Of course, he's going to say that. They're buttering his bread, and that makes sense. And maybe they did give him creative license. It is Scorsese. But I think the main point here is that if even someone of his stature cannot secure or help to secure better screenings, more showings and viewings of a film that's not a superhero film on the big screen, then what possible hope does somebody else have who's maybe just starting out in their career? And I think that's what kind of brings us full circle, Dwight, back to his point about feeling sadness over the state of affairs.
Does make a good point, as much as we like some of those superhero movies, and our kids do too.
That's it, yeah. We vote with our wallets, and a lot of people are still choosing to stay home.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Vote with our wallets like that. It might already be dark outside, but your city still looks beautiful tonight. Colette is promising to stay positive, no negative temps. We'll check in one last time with her after the break. More and more of our activities are powered by voice-activated technology, but that smart tech doesn't work for everyone. If you have Down syndrome, for example, smart speakers can't pick up your unique speech patterns, but Google is working to improve that. It's partnered with the Canadian Down Syndrome Society to create Project Understood, and we caught up with two people who help Google understand a little better.
I'm teaching Google.
I am teaching Google.
I'm teaching Google. Voice technology doesn't always understand people with Down syndrome, which sucks. So we're partnering with Google.
Project Understood is a project that we did with Google that we are so proud to be helping to make the voice happen for people with Down syndrome.
Google's told us right now their out-of-the-box technology would only understand someone with Down syndrome 30% of the time.
My daughter, she has a smaller mouth, she has a longer tongue. Picture talking with the marshmallow in your mouth.
My daughter, I see the frustration at times where she's talking into the digital voice assistant and not being understood.
Also, when I talk too quickly, it doesn't pick up really fast enough to understand when you're talking too quickly, so that is really frustrating. My name is Master McNeil. I live in Trustmark, Ontario. I went to Peterborough at Fleming College.
Set thermostat to 78 degrees.
My apologies, I don't understand.
I contribute with doing phrases. Turn on the light in the bedroom. Or turn on the light to the washroom.
Voice technology, or with this project, the more people that contribute by donating their voice, the better the technology will get. So, through repetition, through analyzing all the different speech patterns from all the participants.
Strawberry jam is sweet.
It's very important that we recruit as many people as possible to participate in this project, projectunderstood.ca.
It makes me really feel that it's really helping a lot of people with Down syndrome and how it will help contribute in society for everybody with Down syndrome and everybody else.
Yeah, it's for all of us. Great job. Love that story.
I do
all
too.
right. I don't know if I love your negativity that's coming, though. What's going on?
It's not my negativity.
Okay.
I am just.
You're friends with Mother Nature and Father Time and Old Man Winter. Those are all your close personals, no? Sorry.
Those are my buddies.
We're blaming the messenger.
I should be in the movie Frozen next to Frozen 2. All right, let's show you what Dwight is talking about here.
He's already complaining, is he, Colette?
It's a long winter, Dwight. We got a long way to go. -1 overnight tonight, feeling like -7 tomorrow morning. So that's the takeaway I want you to have, is that how tomorrow morning is going to feel, especially to get the kids ready, heading out if they're walking to school or headed to the bus stop or that kind of thing. Now, tomorrow afternoon, 4 degrees. Late afternoon into the evening is when we'll start to see this mixed precipitation beginning to move in, and that carries on into Thursday morning.
Did that WC beside the -7 stand for wind chill?
Wind chill.
We're already talking about wind chill. Good night, everybody. I need to talk to my partner here.
I think
Thanks
I'm
for
in
watching.
trouble.
Really?